Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today, we're doing a completely objective, data-driven deep dive into the true value of the Apple and Samsung tech ecosystems. Let's be real, there is a lot of marketing noise out there, so we are going to cut right through it. We're going to figure out exactly where your money is going and provide an executive overview of which of these latest products actually offer the absolute best value for your hard-earned cash. We'll be looking at the hardware, sure, but also the invisible software that ties our daily workflows together. So, let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. For years and years, the tech world has thrown around this phrase, the Apple tax. You know, the assumption that choosing a Mac or an iPhone means you're automatically paying a massive premium just to have that little glowing logo on the back. But when we actually looked at the data for the latest base models across these ecosystems, we realized we really have to challenge that assumption. Are you actually paying more for Apple today, or has the entire market completely shifted under our feet?
Here is exactly how we're going to break this down in today's explainer. 1. The value for money battle. 2. Hardware pricing versus performance. 3. Ecosystems and daily workflow. 4. The student budget dilemma. And finally, 5. Hardware longevity and resale.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the value for money battle.
So, we found a massive surprise flip in the current pricing data. Get this. We compared the entry-level M4 MacBook Air 15-inch directly against Samsung's brand new 16-inch Galaxy Book 6. Now, both of these machines have 16 gigabytes of RAM and 512 gigabytes of storage. But here's the kicker. Samsung is asking $1,249, while Apple comes in at $1,099. You heard that right. Samsung is actually asking you to pay $150 more for their entry-level model than Apple is. The whole Apple tax narrative? It seems to be entirely backward here.
Moving right along to Section 2, hardware pricing versus performance.
Okay, so what does that money actually buy you under the hood? When we look at everyday general performance, that instant snappiness you feel the second you turn on a laptop, we measure that in single-core clock speeds. The M4 Mac hits a score of 170, while the Galaxy Book 6 with its Panther Lake CPU hits 116. That is a massive 47% lead for Apple. And that translates directly into how instantly your apps open and just how incredibly responsive your daily workflow feels.
And you're definitely going to feel that speed advantage when you're browsing the web, too. In the speedometer test, the Mac is 44% faster. But honestly, the most dramatic test we found in the data was a Mozilla Firefox compile. The Mac chewed through the compile in just 19 minutes. The Samsung? It took 63 minutes. Wow. 19 minutes versus 63 minutes is a staggering difference, especially if you're a student or a professional trying to get heavy workloads done on a tight deadline.
But beyond just the raw speed, we really have to objectively contrast the physical hardware you're going to be staring at and touching all day. The trade-offs here are fascinating. The MacBook Air gives you a super bright 500-nit display with 5.3 million pixels, and it operates completely silently because it literally has no fans. Now, for $150 more, the Samsung is giving you a noticeably dimmer 300-nit display with only 2.3 million pixels. That's essentially a 1080p screen stretched out on a 16-inch laptop. Plus, it relies on active cooling fans. And let's be honest, audible fans firing up can be a real distraction when you're sitting in a quiet classroom or a library.
Let's shift gears to Section 3, ecosystems and daily workflow. And this brilliantly illustrates how Samsung has effectively closed the ecosystem gap. Apple is famous for its magical, seamless integration, right? But Samsung basically matches every single Apple feature one-to-one nowadays. Where Apple has AirDrop, Samsung gives you QuickShare. Apple has universal control to seamlessly share your mouse and keyboard across devices. Well, Samsung offers multi-control. Apple just rolled out iPhone mirroring, but Samsung and Windows have had PhoneLink doing similar tasks for ages. When it comes to the daily software workflow, the Windows and Samsung ecosystem is remarkably competitive. It's almost a mirror image. Furthermore, there's one specific software area where Windows laptops currently have a very distinct hardware advantage, and that's onboard AI. We measure this capability in TOPS, or tera operations per second. Now, while Apple Intelligence is highly anticipated, the M4 chip currently hits about 38 TOPS. Meanwhile, the new Intel chips inside the latest Windows machines are hitting a massive 97 TOPS. If you need raw power for running dedicated, on-device AI tasks right now, today, Windows takes the crown.
Which brings us to Section 4, the student budget dilemma.
When you look at building out an entire setup on a tight budget, this is where Samsung really shines. They provide vastly cheaper, incredibly versatile entry points. You don't have to go out and buy a $1,000 flagship phone. You can grab a budget A-series phone and still get all that great ecosystem integration. You can buy a budget Galaxy Tab FE, and this is huge, unlike an iPad, the S Pen stylus is actually included right in the box. Plus, a lot of these Galaxy Books feature 360-degree hinges with touchscreens and a tent mode. You're effectively getting a tablet and a laptop in one single purchase.
And a big part of that budget equation comes down to something we deal with every single day: connectivity. The Samsung gives you an Ethernet jack, an HDMI port, regular USB-A ports, and a micro SD card reader all built right into the chassis. The Mac, you get MagSafe and 2 Thunderbolt ports. That's it. For a student, Samsung's approach is a massive, immediate money saver. It entirely frees you from having to buy and lug around a bag full of expensive dongles just to hook up a basic thumb drive or connect to a classroom projector.
Finally, let's wrap up with Section 5, Hardware Longevity and Resale.
So the crucial point is summarized beautifully by this quote derived from the data we analyzed. The daily reality of living with a Windows machine often involves juggling constant driver updates, firmware patches, and little OS tweaks just to keep things running smoothly. And that mental overhead heavily impacts your long-term satisfaction. On the flip side, macOS is famously tightly controlled. It is highly optimized, it's just a simpler, more stable software experience that tends to degrade far less over the years. Which brings us to our ultimate long-term matrix. This is the big picture, directly comparing student-friendly entry pricing against hardware longevity. Impartially speaking, it's a classic trade-off. Samsung gives you absolutely unmatched immediate flexibility, amazing touchscreen versatility, and vastly cheaper entry points to get your phone and tablet set up today. However, Apple machines run smoother for longer, they suffer from way fewer software headaches over the years, and they hold their financial value brilliantly on the used market when you eventually decide it's time to sell and upgrade.
Which leaves us with this final question for you to consider. When you look at your own workflow, and of course your own bank account, will you prioritize the immediate, expansive versatility that Samsung offers today, or will you invest in the seamless, optimized reliability of Apple for tomorrow? Take a good look at your own priorities, run the numbers for yourself, and decide which ecosystem truly serves your focus best. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.